Hello and welcome everyone to CMS Connected. I'm your host, Veronica Cooper, and we are going to have some fun today. With us we have two open source web CMS platforms, Hippo and Plone. And joining me today is Scott Lewer. Scott is the lead analyst of WCM Practice for Outsells Gilbane Services and the president of CM Pros. Hello, Scott.
Hey, Veronica.
How are you doing?
I'm really good. Happy to be here. I'm on the West Coast, so it's good morning.
All right, well, before we get started, I'd like to briefly explain the process. This is going to be an informative and engaging 90-minute event. Our CMS Connected guests today will each be asked 15 set questions from Scott. And after both vendor guests have replied to each set question, I will read out any posts from the attending audience. And at the end of all the questions, the audience can ask our guests any general questions until the end of the show. And again, 90 minutes today. Also, please feel free to tweet using the hashtag CMSConnected. Now at this point, I'd like to introduce our event sponsors, Prescient Digital Media. Prescient is a group of senior Internet and intranet consultants that provide strategic consulting, planning, and communication services to organizations of all sizes, delivering highly effective and innovative website and intranet plans, designs, and solutions. And Falcon-Software. Falcon provides web creative, e-commerce development, content management, social media, and mobile solutions for organizations across the globe, with a focus of delivering your project on time, on budget, and to your complete satisfaction. And our event sponsor, CM Pros. CM Pros helps its 16,000 plus members all over the world to succeed by enhancing their knowledge and expertise, sharing practices, and connecting business members, corporate, and individual practitioners to further develop the industry as a strategic business imperative. All right, now to introduce our first guest, we have Aryeh Khan from Hippo. Aryeh is Hippo's co-founder and chief technical officer. Hello, Aryeh. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Veronica. Good to be here. How are you?
I am just great, thank you. Let's introduce your opponent. Introducing our second guest, we have Matt Hamilton representing Plone. Matt is currently serving as the elected VP of the Plone Foundation, and Matt is also technical director at NetSite Internet Solutions. Hello, Matt.
Hello, Veronica.
Are you ready for an exciting 90 minutes?
Oh, I am. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be good.
All right. Well, I'd like to now turn things over to Scott to start the questions. Scott?
Sure thing. Thank you. Okay. Well, we'll start with the softball. The first question, and we're going to snake this back and forth, so that Aryeh, we'll start with you. We'll ask you a question. Matt, then we'll go over to you, and then we'll do the next set of questions, starting with Matt, and we'll snake our way back and forth like that. So, first one is to Aryeh, and I'd like you to take a couple of minutes and just tell us a little bit about Hippo, the customer population that you serve, and the problems that you seek to solve. And just so the audience knows as well, we've allowed both teams to provide us with a few slides about themselves that they'll kind of speak to here, but we'll be done with all of that once we kind of get through this first question. But thanks so much. So, Aryeh, go ahead and tell us a little bit about Hippo.
All right. Well, thank you, Scott. So, Hippo is really an enterprise open source content management system. So we focus on the enterprise market. Our customers are typically mid to high-end market customers who deal with lots and lots of content. We've been around for almost 12 years already, and we've done multi-channel publishing right from the start. So if you look at Hippo, when compared to other systems, it's really about managing content in a central content repository, pushing that out to all kinds of different channels, like your website, your portal, your mobile channel, your social channel, anything. And we do that for publishers, higher education, financial institutions, multinationals that have to deal with multilingual situations that have to translate content and publish it across the globe. That's our typical customer, for Hippo. If you look at the business problems that we're solving with our product, it's mostly within environments where we have to deal with lots of content, where web teams have to push something live really quickly, or create a new website or a sub-site out of an existing set of content. So we do a lot of reusing of existing content, making sure that content stays alive for multiple years or decades if you want it. So we don't focus on web page content management. We really focus on pure content management and distributing that to all those different channels. The basic system, the basis of the system is constant, and then the front ends change all the time. We see a lot of change in the market, especially in the web, and we need to be able to deal with that. Integration is something that we do a lot, and that's more or less what Hippo is about.
Great, thanks so much. Okay, so Matt, let's bring you into this conversation. Tell us a little bit about Plone and the Plone Foundation, the population of users and customers that you serve, and the problems that you seek to solve with Plone.
Right, so Plone is it's an open source content management system, specifically focusing at the sort of web content management. It's a very international project. It's currently, there's about companies, registered Plone companies in 68 different countries. There's over 350 solution providers. Plone was first released in 2001. It's currently available in about 40 different languages. There's no, unlike Hippo, there's no Plone Incorporated or Plone Limited company. Plone is just a project that is participated in by a large number of companies worldwide and individuals worldwide. There is one central element, which is the Plone Foundation, which owns the intellectual property and the sort of copyright. So Plone, it's written in Python. It's based upon the Zope application platform, and that provides things like security and templating. And then there's a load of plugins to do things like the workflow, storage, relational managers, cataloging, that sort of thing. And then Plone provides the sort of tie-in and user interface of all of those elements together. So really, looking at Plone in terms of sort of customers, there's a wide variety of customers from all different walks that use Plone, both for things like public websites and also a lot for intranets. Plone is very strong on that side of things in terms of user management and access control as well.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, let's just kind of keep you rolling here, and let's move to our second question, which is, you were getting there anyway. Let's talk about some of the differentiators. So Plone claims itself to be among the top 2% of all open source projects worldwide, I've read. Can you clarify what that means exactly, and then tell us specifically what we should know about the product and what differentiates it from others, whether it be from Hippo or from any others. Tell us some of the kind of key differentiators for you.
Right, so the top 2% metric, that comes from a open source sort of measuring system called OLO that measures projects in terms of their activity, lines of code, number of contributors, that sort of thing. And the amount of development in Plone has escalated quite considerably. So, for instance, there have been about 10,000 commits to the Plone core repository in total over the past nearly 10 years. And over half of those were in the last couple of years. So it's really kind of accelerated. In terms of differentiators, as I started to talk about, one of the main areas that Plone's really strong on is the areas such as user management, access control, and things like workflow. So if you need to model business processes, Plone's very good at that. So comparing it to some of the other open source content management systems, it's a pretty big beast. If you were just using it to build something like the online website for your local cake shop or something like that, then Plone might be a bit overkill, and you might be best suited to something like Joomla or WordPress. But if you were comparing it to something like SharePoint, it's a lot more flexible. It has a object database in the back end which lends itself to content management. So there's a lot of familiarity there in terms of the hierarchy of folders. You create folders and put content in folders. And the database is schemaless, so it's very extendable as well.
So just, I want to allow you to clarify a little bit. You did mention just SharePoint now, but I wanted to make sure that you don't just differentiate it amongst other open source players, but amongst all players. So does the same hold true, or do you want to clarify at all, even over all of the players in the market?
Yeah, I would say it's a very flexible system, and
yeah.
That's really where we find a lot of differentiation. So if you look at something like SharePoint or some of the big commercial web content management systems, you find it's much quicker to deploy solutions and customizations based upon Plone. Because out of the box, no content management system is going to do what you want to do, you know, in its entirety. So you're going to have to spend some time in customizing it, extending it to meet your actual business requirements. And so you want something that is very rapid to do that. And that's where it's very good, especially over, like I said, things like SharePoint that have a very specific way of working. And if that way doesn't work the way you want to work, then you're out of luck. Whereas with Plone, you can adapt Plone to work better how you want to work.
Fair enough. Okay, good. So Arye, over to you then. So our second question slide to Arye. Same question really. Tell us what differentiates Hippo from other products on the market, and again, you know, against all other projects. You guys know my thought on this, but I hate the scarlet letter that open sourcers even put on their own chest. Let's compare it to all products in the market, as anybody who's listening now and is thinking about either of your two products should be comparing you against all products. So in that context, tell us some of your differentiators.
Right. Yeah, so that is important what you were just saying. Normally we don't compare ourselves with other open source systems. And when we're competing against another CMS, it's, you know, 9 out of 10, it's a proprietary commercial offering. So we don't, you know, even though the product is open source, that has to do with our development methodology, not really with, you know, the contents of the product or what kind of features it would have. And I think that's very important to see. Hippo was designed to be an enterprise system. It is not a web page content management system, and in that sense, it's very different from other CMSs, either open source or you know, closed source or commercial or whatever you want to call it. We don't manage web pages per se. We manage individual content objects that are stored in our central content repository, and then that content goes through our workflow, which of course we have, just as Matt just mentioned, Plone has, and that is of course all very flexible. The difference is that we push that content to a multitude of different channels, depending on your setup, of course, and depending on what channels you want to use. And that is what, you know, the flexibility that Hippo offers. It's not just about web pages. It is about working with content in this growing content platform called the web that we all have to deal with nowadays. The other thing which Hippo is really good at and what differentiates us from other systems is the integration capabilities. So we do a lot of integration work with existing systems. Because of our Java background, Hippo is Java-based, not Python-based, as Plone is, or PHP-based, as a lot of other systems are in the open source space. We are Java, and we see a lot of Java enterprise integration going on in our space. So we take content from external systems, you know, index that in our repository, and then distribute it to all of those channels. That's what we do different than others. And you need that in, you know, this new world where we don't just have websites, we also have iPads and mobile phones, and we still have print, we have HTML5 and mailings and everything is content nowadays. So that's what you manage with Hippo.
Okay, great. So put some, you know, tell us next question then. Let's give us an example of this. So pull this down to reality. I know we love to talk about coulda, shoulda, wouldas, but tell us about a specific case study where you've implemented your product and it's basically achieved all these things that you'll be telling us is wonderful about your product today.
Right. Yeah. So the really nice example that I want to mention is the Dutch library project that we did. We implemented a CMS for all the Dutch libraries, And that means that they're now all working on the same content repository, which is centralized. And the great thing about it is that we have a setup where Hippo sits in the central organization, and then all the different library institutions have their own CMSs. So they still use their own systems, but they push their content into the central content repository where it's aggregated and then sent out to all the different libraries again. So we have this really interesting hybrid situation where we have all those different CMS systems that are, they're not controlled by Hippo, but they're working together through Hippo, which is a really, really interesting enterprise scenario. We see lots of customers that already have a CMS in place. They already have certain pieces of software that they bought and rolled out in their organization, and they don't want to move away from it, but they do want to be able to reuse their existing content in the mobile channel or other new ways of publishing content in the online world. So that's one really nice case study. The other one that I would like to mention is a financial services company in the U.S. And unfortunately, I'm not allowed to mention their name, but it's one of the largest financial institutions, a U.S. bank, and they use Hippo because they were looking for a system that would scale to the traffic they needed, and also they needed a system that was very, very secure. And that's another aspect of Hippo, and another great case of why you should be using Hippo: scalability and security.
Wow, so for a technical guy, you can sell well. So good job there. Good on you, Matt. Over to you.
Thanks, Scott.
Over to you, Matt. Let's give us a specific case study, and you've got some fans out there on Twitter. So by the way, if you're listening in, make sure to follow that CMS Connected hashtag and join this conversation. We're all on it. So anyway, you're getting a little bit of back padding and support from the market. Tell us a specific case study for Plone, Matt.
Okay, the one I'm going to talk about is a company called Belron that few people have actually heard of, but they're a €2 billion a year turnover company. They're most likely known under their brand names of Autoglass or Car Glass or Safelite, depending upon where you are in the world. And they do vehicle glass replacement. So they're the people that come out to the roadside and replace the glass in your windscreen when it gets cracked. Now, they came to us looking for an intranet, and that's what we initially went out to build for them. It was a competitive tender with 7 different CMSs, 4 commercial, 3 open source, and Plone was deemed the best fit for their needs. So we built this intranet for them, and it had the usual kind of news, the podcasts from the CEO, that sort of stuff. But where Plone really excels is the extensibility. So they needed a system, for example, to manage all of their radio and TV adverts worldwide. If you've heard any of their adverts, they've got a very specific formula they use for them. And we built a system called AdLab for them within their intranet that allows them to upload the video and audio and does things like has the transcripts of the audio broken down in sections, the first 5 seconds and the next 10 seconds of the audio relate to this transcript, such that they can actually break it up and rebuild new adverts based upon existing ones. Not for production use, but really for testing out how a new advert would work within a setting. And they can show that they can see all the adverts that are happening in other countries worldwide. Another example they then needed was a technical knowledge system, and they've got technicians out on the road the whole time, and they need to find, say, a particular adhesive for a particular type of glass on a particular vehicle. They can go into the knowledge system, and if it's not in there, post the question, and if it's urgent, get sent out via SMS to all of their technicians. They can then reply, then the final accepted answer can then be promoted up as good practice. So this is a kind of a really good example of where Plone's strengths are, in that you can start off with something fairly sort of generic in terms of, say, an intranet, and then build up to much more specific functionality to do with a particular business. The other advantage in this case is they use the same system. They use Plone for both their intranet and a lot of their public websites as well. So they have, for instance, an employee recognition website that anybody can go along to. They have a website for a triathlon that they run every year that they sponsor. So these are public websites, and they use the same technology for those as they do their intranet, which means they can minimize the amount of training required between different the different systems, because it's the same back end. And in some cases, there's communication between those sites as well. So the employee recognition microsite, people are put forward on the intranet, but then the public information comes out on the microsite. The next steps in that are a mobile site, so Plone can also do things like mobile publishing as well, and the multi-channel delivery. And Plone can also detect what the capabilities of the system, the screen size, and things like that to deliver the best content. In terms of a quick mention of some other sites, again, Plone is very hot on security. Two big names that use Plone for public sites are both the FBI and the CIA in the US, and that probably speaks, as a simple statement to the security of Plone in itself.
Wow,
right,
boy,
Matt, I'm going to stop you there because, Scott, I'm going to have to interrupt. We're starting to get the questions coming in from the audience now, and this one is directed to both of you, and I thought this might be a good time to bring it up. The question is, do either of you offer your software or platform in the cloud? And Aryeh, let's start with you from Hippo for that answer.
All right. Yeah, great question. Yes, we offer a hosted environment. We offer an on-demand solution, which means that we have our own cloud installation where you can have a little piece of this environment and host Hippo on. We also have a lot of customers that do hosting themselves or host Hippo in their own private cloud environments. The on-demand offering is one of our better running products. We see that there's a lot of interest in that, and we're getting more and more customers in the on-demand platform every day.
All right, great. Thanks, Aryeh. Matt, same question to you. Does Plone offer your software or platform in the cloud?
Yes, it does. So there's various different ways you can do that. Plone is very amenable to virtualization, so we have a lot of customers that have Plone in a virtual setting within their organization, so running on top of VMware or Xen or KVM or one of the virtualization platforms. Do it that way. The other thing that was recently launched is Ploud, P-L-O-U-D.net. Ploud is, as you probably guessed from the name, Plone in the cloud. And if you go to ploud.net now, you can sign up and within about 20 seconds have a Plone site up and running at yourname.ploud.net. You can test it out. You can also go in there and upload a theme or activate various third-party products and plugins to customize Plone as you want.
All right, Matt, thank you. Scott, I'll toss it back to you for the next question.
Sure thing. I'm glad the question came in about the cloud because that's really relevant. But I will say, though, that Matt, you had perfectly teed up my next question at the end of your response to the last one, which was about security. So you say that you've got the FBI and CIA. I wonder if you haven't gotten a couple of calls for them recently. I know that you guys over on the Plone side really like to talk up your reputation in security an awful lot. But haven't you just recently had, a few relatively well-publicized breaches? I was on your forum and saw, I think, 4 fixes for some of those recently. Tell us how that kind of blends in with that claim.
Yeah, so there's been a couple of security vulnerabilities discovered within Plone by some of the Plone developers recently, and patches were very quickly released for those. To put this in context, there were these 4 that were basically related together to the same sort of security audit that was done that found them. The last vulnerability before then was in 2008, and the one before that was in 2006. So if you're used to an environment in which you have to patch every Tuesday because of security vulnerabilities, then Plone will be quite refreshing to you. We measure our security vulnerabilities in intervals in years generally rather than in days or weeks. So yes, there were a couple recently. Plone actually has a security team that deal directly with these security vulnerabilities, and those were then publicized ahead of time to state that there would be a particular patch released and people could get ready to fix those as the patches came out. But one of the things with Plone is the actual design of Plone itself is designed to be secure from the start in terms of the programming model that it uses. So, for instance, one of the biggest vulnerabilities in a lot of CMS systems, especially some of the PHP-based CMS systems, is SQL vulnerabilities, SQL injection attacks. Well, Plone's completely oblivious to that whole class of attack because it doesn't actually use an SQL database in the back end. It's got a high-performance object database. So, you know, you're missing that whole section there. And it's got built-in stuff to do with cross-site scripting attacks, you know, protection against that, form validation, all of that sort of thing built in there. So, although Plone has a lot of third-party products and plugins that are developed by, you know, other developers that are available for download, it's actually very difficult to accidentally make an insecure plugin and have that cause problems for your site. And like I said, Plone's used by a lot of big-name people because of its security specifically.
Well, that's interesting. So again on the CMS connected hashtag, someone has nicely kind of corrected me and said that this security team of which you speak actually proactively went out and found these issues before they were actually exploited, which I think is a fair point. However, I'd ask, what was that security team doing before? Did they just suddenly kind of ramp up within a week because they suddenly go out and find 3? That trend doesn't look great. Help us feel more comfortable with it.
Yeah, they were, like I said, they were related to the same thing. So although they were given 3 separate vulnerability numbers within CVE, they were actually related to the same thing. So I probably, you know, classify them more as 1 vulnerability than 3 vulnerabilities. And the security team haven't been just sat there idle over the years. They've been continually assessing what goes on. And of course, as Plone develops, there is, you know, the chances that unfortunately things can slip through the net. But in this case, they were caught. The vulnerabilities were detected before you know, any actual breaches had ever happened. And not only did they release the patches, but they also released a tool to analyze log files to try and detect whether anybody had actually been, whether any of these vulnerabilities had actually been exploited. So they are very very proactive on this.
Okay. All right, great. You're let's let you off the hot seat. Have a glass of water. Aryeh, over to you. Let's see if we can't bring you back into this mix here. So, I mean, you know, tell me about this. I think you know, we've got folks on the line from all over the place, but you know, my experience with you and your team is that you've been trying for a while to kind of get out beyond the Benelux area and specifically into the U.S. for an example. It seems like you've been trying to penetrate for a while. What challenges are you facing, and is it fair to say that that's not been as successful as you'd like so
far? Well, it's challenging, yeah. It's been you know, it's interesting trying to start a company in the U.S. in September 2008. You know, that might not have been the best timing ever for us, but you know, we managed to do very well actually. You know, we have some really nice customers over there, and from some very long-term relationships. We have customers that have been with us for, you know, 4, 5, 6 years, and we also had customers in the U.S. prior to our move into the office in San Francisco. However, yeah, we did have some trouble with the whole economic situation when we started. It seems though that that is now going much better, and we've recently opened up a second office in Boston, which is a really interesting location to be in. We were in San Francisco only before, but we noticed that a lot of our customers are actually coming from the East Coast, so we're trying to put our focus there. And apart from that, we still have to communicate a lot about Hippo, the product. We have to spread the word more in the U.S. Europe has been, much more accepting of open source in the last couple of years, but we now see that the U.S. is catching up big time. And so there's a lot more interest from the U.S. Market in open source projects, and especially in the enterprise space. So we're considered first-class citizens in the CMS ecosystem in the U.S. right now, which is great. But there's still there's still work to do.
Great. Okay. Fair enough. So timing wasn't great, but I guess you've had enough traction that you're opening an office on the East Coast, and that's, by the way, that's in addition to you were out in the Bay Area. Is that right, originally?
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Okay, good. So let's move to the next question. So some folks on the webinar today who may not be completely familiar with the open source world might think of all open source CMSs as being, kind of cut from the same cloth, or at least all being free. So I know there are a number of options, but whittling it down to the kind of simplest two. Since you're up first on this question, Ari, I'll ask if you can please just can you generally differentiate the commercial open source philosophy from the more kind of traditional, project-based, FOSS, I hate the FOSS term, and if you don't mind, then also tell the audience why kind of you and the other Hippo founders chose to go the commercial licensing route. So one, just kind of give us an overview of the differentiation amongst the models, and then two, just kind of tell us why you went the route that you did.
All right. Okay, that's great, because it also allows me to answer a little bit of the previous question about the security part. I think that open source for us really is a development model. It's not a religion. It's not that we feel that developing something in an open source community is the way it should be done. We truly believe that if we open up our code and open up our community and allow others to look at our code and provide feedback and comment on it, that in the end we'll have a higher quality product than everyone else. So that's the reason why we chose open source. The other thing is that if you would start a software company today and not make use of the open source community, then that would be quite silly, I would say. It's like writing a new encyclopedia from scratch and trying to sell it and make money out of it. Well, there's Wikipedia. There's so much available already in the open source world. You have to use it, and you have to be part of that community to be able to steer it into the right direction, and that's what we're doing. So if you look at Hippo, it's not just the product itself that is open source, it's also all the components that are inside it are open source, and most of them come from the Apache Software Foundation, which is a very important ecosystem for us. We invest heavily in the Apache Software Foundation. We have lots of committers there, participating in all of the different open source projects that they have. But what a company wants is, at the end of the day, they want to have certain guarantees and securities, and that is what any company provides. A software company should give you some kind of guarantee about their product, and then even a lot of them don't do that. But this is what we do. We sell support subscriptions which give you a certain number of guarantees about our product, about the stability, how well we tested it, and the scalability and all that. And that is what we as a company provide you as a customer. The code is all open source, but it is, that is completely separate from our business model. If you look at the previous question about security, what I wanted to add there is that Hippo, as a company, sells support subscriptions to customers with certain service level agreements. So, for example, what we do is we offer 24/7 support with 30-minute response time, so worldwide. So that means that whenever you hit upon a security issue, there will be someone from Hippo able to pick it up within 30 minutes, which is incredibly fast, and it's a really great service that we offer. And that is why the commercial, that's what the commercial company does. Even though the product is open source, you need this type of security and support from commercial company. So that's why why we believe in that model. And the license that we have is not really a commercial license. The license that we sell is just the support license, the support subscription. So that's what you get from us.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that it's almost kind of Trojan horsey in my mind, and there's been some comments about whether that's kind of a disingenuous model or not. Do you feel like, I'm not claiming that it is per se, but are you viewed within the open source world as kind of a sellout, so to speak? I mean, I feel like this whole kind of by the community for the community is the hype around much of the open source world. Do you feel like you're fully participative in kind of the open source activities? And let's, by the way, I'll ask, I know my questions are even long-winded, but let's try to get more answers in, so we'll keep them shorter. But respond to that. Are you a sellout in the open source world?
No, absolutely not. I don't feel it at all like that. Yeah, but it is. This is why we participate actively within the Apache Software Foundation, for example, because we believe that we must be active there and we must be visible to be to be trustworthy, and we are. So I have no doubts that about this at all.
Good stuff. All right, Matt. Let's come and bring you back in over here. So over to you. So first of all, do you agree with REA's characterization of the kind of philosophical differences? So feel free to add on there or adjust that as you may. I think he pointed out something really nice, which you also just tweeted, which was REA said not using open source in this day would be like writing an encyclopedia from scratch when Wikipedia already exists. So I think that was a really good point. So you obviously agree with that, but tell us how you feel, and specifically why did Plone go the way of kind of the FOSS model, and what advantages do you get from that, specifically over kind of commercial open source-ish like Hippo?
Well, I suppose at the end there you said, why did we choose to go that route? I suppose if you actually look back, it wasn't really a conscious decision as such. That really was the route at the time. When Plone came out, there wasn't really the idea of a commercial open source model. Open source was open source. So the model that Plone has is that there are a whole series of companies and individuals worldwide, all of which who have equal say and equal power. So there's not one central company as such, like the Hippo or Alfresco or Day or whatever model, Adobe rather now, but it's a model in which you have a number of individual companies around the world who participate in this community and provide the support. So if you want 24/7 support, you can still get that. You can get that from a number of different companies, not just one company, and you have the opportunity to pick a company that's going to fit your requirements. If you're some big, massive enterprise, then you're going to want a larger company that is used to dealing with that, and that will probably charge accordingly for the services that you want. If you are a smaller, say an NGO or charity or something, then you possibly want somebody that deals specifically in your sector and has the same kind of ethics and goals that you have. So, or is in the same geographic region as you that you might want to use. So you have that opportunity as well to pick somebody that is going to fit better within your organization. So, I mean, the Plone community is global. As I mentioned at the start, there are companies, registered Plone companies within 68 different countries. There's probably more that are not even registered that we don't even know about. I suppose that's one of the biggest problems as a community we have, is because nobody comes and buys a contract or whatever off of one central place. It's very difficult for us to actually track how many people worldwide are actually using Plone. And ironically, I think probably the highest concentration of Plone companies per capita worldwide is actually in the Netherlands, the home of Hippo. But I wake up in the morning and I check check Twitter, and there's a whole bunch of tweets from Japan about people talking about Plone. I don't speak Japanese, unfortunately, so I don't know particularly what they're saying. And Google Translate is a bit of a fun time with translating a language like Japanese to English. But it's great to see that this is happening worldwide. You have a much more diverse knowledge base. You've got people that work in so many different industries contributing, and so many different areas that they can actually contribute to the community and add in the knowledge and the experience that they have. And then overseeing all of this, you've got the Plone Foundation, and the Plone Foundation holds the intellectual property rights and does things like the marketing and handles some bits and pieces of the infrastructure. But the Plone Foundation in and of itself is a not-for-profit U.S. registered 503c entity that has an elected board of directors. And so, you don't have the problem that, one day one company can, pick up its ball and decide to leave the playground and leave everybody else behind. We've got a very high what's called bus factor, in terms of how many people would you have to, run over by a bus, or how many people does it take getting run over by a bus to damage or kill a project. And with Plone, that's very high. It's such a diverse community in itself, and geographically spread out, that if one particular company or part of it decided no longer to be doing Plone or went bust or whatever, that's not going to affect the community as a whole. There's a lot of redundancy there.
All right, Matt, thanks for that answer, both of you, and I'm going to interrupt with yet another question from our audience. This is directed to both of you. Which standards are supported by both systems? Arye, let's start with you from Hippo.
Okay, so within the Java world, there's a number of standards that you just have to support, and most notably, it's the Java Content Repository Specification, which is a Java Community Project standard. We support that, both the 1.0 as well as the 2.0 version, so that's JCR. Also, of course, we exchange information using XML. Exporting, importing, drawing in feeds from outside or pushing it out. And there's the REST API generator that we have. So with Hippo, you can design and set up a REST API on top of your content repository and expose all of your content, or at least that part of the content that you want to push out, of course, securely in using a REST protocol. Apart from that, we've used SOAP as a protocol, and all kinds of HTTP-related protocols. Of course, there's HTML, there's CSS, there's XHTML, but I consider all of that basics. You just have to have that. Apart from that, we see traction with CMS, the new content management interoperability standard. We just built a CMS connector for Nixio, a document management system that is open source and Java based as well. So we nicely integrate with them and are able to get content or documents out of their system and use them within Hippo. So CMS is another standard that we are currently rolling out.
Okay, great. Thanks, Arye. Matt, same question for Plone. Which standards are supported by both systems?
This is a question that's always slightly baffled me, because it seems like such an open-ended question as to what people are actually trying to do. So in terms of, if you look in the sort of lower guts of Plone, for instance, Plone supports a standard called WSGI, which is the Web Standards Gateway interface for Python. So that allows you to plug in various bits of middleware. So it supports standards like that. In terms of standards, as Arye said, there's certain stuff that you have to support, the HTML standards, CSS, XML, all that kind of thing. Right from the very start, Plone is built upon an application platform called Zope, and right since that was released in 1999, you've been able to do things like FTP into Zope and effectively into Plone to get to the database. So you can use things like FTP to put files up, you can use XML RPC, you can use WebDAV. So there's a number of ways of interacting with Plone. Plus there's then people working on things like REST APIs for Plone as well, and ways to interact with that way. I think one of the things that we found is, being open source and being community open source, the standards that get used and adopted and created are ones that people actually want to use. So Arye mentioned CMS, for instance, that Hippo supports. There's been a lot of talk about CMS, and people have asked, well, does Plone support CMS, or when will Plone support CMS? And the answer to that is really when people actually want to use it. And so far, we've not seen anybody actually wanting to use CMS in anger. I wrote very quickly a CMS adapter to connect Plone to Alfresco, so we can pull content from Plone, from Alfresco out and display it in Plone as a proof of concept. And writing that implementation took me about half an hour. But really it's a case of if people actually want it, then it will be developed and supported, because the worst thing to happen is for us to just randomly start supporting standards that are not going to stick around, that people are not going to continue using in the long run, because otherwise you just end up with code that just gets stale and people don't use it and it doesn't get maintained. So Plone has actually removed a lot of bits and pieces of its code over the years that are no longer being used.
Okay, Matt, thanks for that answer, and the questions keep coming in on this very subject. I'm going to go to a question from Steve, and I'll direct it to both of you again. Steve is more interested in standards like web accessibility to meet government requirements. Matt, do you want to quickly answer that one, and then Arye will get to you.
Yeah, sure. So right when Plone started off, it conformed to WAI-AA standard for the web content accessibility. We've implemented sites that even hit AAA, which is actually quite a tricky one to hit. One way of actually sort of illustrating this, one of the original Plone founders, a guy called Alex Leamy, then went on to work for user interface at Google and is now the head of user interface at Mozilla for Firefox. So that gives you a bit of the pedigree of the user experience side of things.
Okay, Matt, thanks. Arye, same question for you. Hippo's standards for web accessibility to meet government requirements.
Oh yeah, the government sector is a very important group of customers for us. The entire Dutch government, or the central government, I should say, is using Hippo, and they really require us to meet those accessibility standards, and we do. Of course, it's something that you need to take into account when you design your website. If your CMS, any CMS could potentially support accessibility standards. I'm very sure they can. But you also need to have the expertise to design a site in such a way that the CMS is actually able to make it accessible. And that is often something that is overlooked. So for anyone wanting to build a new website and having to adhere to these accessibility standards, I would say start with that right from the beginning when you design your website, and make sure that it gets in. Hippo supports it.
All right, thanks, gentlemen. Scott, back to you.
Okay, sure. So now we'll start to move along a little faster. So with some of the answers and with the questions, though, I tell you, Matt, you threw down the gauntlet when you made your comment about CMIS talking about you only support standards that are actually going to stick around and have a life. So that was interesting. I think some folks might. I'm
going to get a few responses to that.
Yeah, you're going to get some hate mail for that, but you know what? You deserve it. So that was anyway. So let's talk about Plone. Tell us. Who's guiding the ship here? One of the points that Arye made when he talked about kind of their model there was that, everyone can know that you've got this group of folks who are just focused solely on that. It's the pure concentration. They're kind of road mapping it out. Who guides the ship for Plone, and how does that work for you? Who's setting vision?
Okay, so the way it works with Plone is you've got the Plone Foundation, and that sets some of the very high-level stuff, but generally tries not to get involved too much in the actual development. There are some people within the Plone community that set some of the sort of high-level vision side of things that kind of come out every year at the annual Plone Developer Conference. In terms of the actual technical direction and the implementation, within Plone we've got what's called the framework team. Now, I mentioned that there are quite a large number of Plone developers and a lot of core committers, people that have direct commit access into Plone. It's measuring in the hundreds rather than in the tens. And we have a framework team, actually for each Plone version. So for Plone 3, there's a framework team. For Plone 4, which is the current version, there's a framework team. And the framework team is the one that actually sets the direction in terms of what things happen. So within Plone, we've got a thing called the Plone Improvement Process, and shortened to PLIP. And so anybody can submit a PLIP that says, I want Plone to do this, these are the risks, these are the goals, and this is the code to do it. And then the framework team take those PLIPs and integrate them together. So we've just switched from a feature-based release cycle to a time-based release cycle. So there's now releases every 6 months. And one of the things we're doing is pulling some of the stuff that was intended to be in Plone 5, which is going to be quite a sort of revolutionary release rather than an evolutionary one, and start to bring them forward. So some of the stuff that was slated to be in Plone 5 is now going to be in Plone 4.1, 4.2, 4.3 on 6-month cycles to bring it to the people sooner rather than later.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. So, Arya, then back over to you. I'll ask you kind of the inverse of that, which is you've got someone who's supposedly, driving the ship. I don't mean that word supposedly to actually question that you are, or the capacity to which you are. But, number one, I think, does that give you an advantage over the Plones of the world, that model? And then secondly, and we've had a question from the audience come in about this, so whoever asked, note that I'm asking it. How then do you incorporate that feedback from the community, and are you really using the kind of the power of the people, so to speak, to keep your product moving forward?
All right. Okay. So there's, okay, I'm thinking how I'm going to answer that question. So the way that we work is that very clearly we have a company backing the community, and that is beneficial to all of our customers. First of all, because in a true open source community that is run by volunteers, there's always stuff that no one wants to do. You see, and that's even though it's not it's not the thing that I like to talk about, but there's a lot of loose ends, a lot of things that were never really finished in open source projects. You do see that within the open source world, and this is why I believe that being a company backing the product, we have the capacity and the resources, and the budget to make sure that it gets done on time, maybe for a particular customer if they want to and if they pay us for it. So there's this force within our company to have a certain level of quality that we absolutely must maintain, and that is what the company is doing. And then there's underneath this huge piece of foundation code, stuff that that does the true processing and the storage layers and the persistency and the security mechanism and the authentication, authorization, and search and all of that. And that is what what comes out of the open source communities like the Apache Software Foundation. So those are projects that are not really products themselves. They're more like building blocks, and that's how we see it. Those building blocks can be put into any type of product, and they can be used in a variety of ways. Our search engine, which is Apache Lucene, is also used by Microsoft Outlook. It's in their product, and for years already. So we leave these like commodity functionalities to the open source community, and we participate them within the Apache Software Foundation. But when it when things have to get done, that's when we as a company step up and just do it. So that's how Hippo is different, I think.
So I think you might get some hate mail there too, but I hear your point, and I've made this a number of times as well. No, I think what you're talking about there to a degree is the kind of forest for the trees, right? And that even in Matt's response about CMS, which I made sure to tweet Matt, so you will get some hate mail on that front. Even on that point, I think what you're saying, Arya, is that the community or the users have to kind of see an obvious value in the feature or function, whereas you might see kind of the second level of that value down the road. So you're doing this in preparation, kind of foundational stuff that might not be immediately in demand, but sets the stage for future type of things. And I see that point, so I'll join you in that. Is that fair from your perspective?
Yeah, I think you just rephrased what I was trying to say really nicely. Thank you, Scott. Sure
thing. I'm not taking sides though. Let me go at you now. No, I'm teasing. Next slide, next question is just about, just Java in general. And you talked up your, appeal for Apache, your love of Apache. I think you wear an Apache patch. Is there such a thing? You wave that banner well. Tell us, I think, and I know that your team is, very involved and contributors to Cocoon and Jackrabbit and a few other things. So tell us more about kind of the advantages of that architecture. And by the way, just quickly, I ask these questions because my impression is of the people who are on the phone and on the webinars that we have a bit more of a technical slanted crowd. So let's get to we're going to get to the kind of businessy stuff next. We've got another about 35 minutes going, but let's make this one of the last kind of techie, geeky questions. But go ahead and answer if you don't mind. Tell us the advantages of your architecture.
All right, all right. Well, first of all, the Apache Software Foundation is not only about Java. So there's a number of C projects as well, and in the past we also had the PHP system part of the Apache Foundation in some form. So it's not just about Java, but for us, Java is an important programming language. Java has grown together with the internet. Java got better because of the internet, and the internet got better because of Java in a way. And I know it's a very bold statement, but it's the way that Java is designed, the object-oriented architecture. It's the sharing of Java objects, sharing the code that is very fundamental to Java. And it kind of, when the internet happened, or the World Wide Web happened back in, what was it, 94, 96, that was when Java was introduced by Sun, and it first off there was this slow start because of applets and everything, but after that, the enterprise world caught up and figured that this would be the next enterprise programming language to run on servers, and that exactly happened. And I think Java is, a really, really good example of community development, and I mean with that, I mean that it forces you to think in reusable components. It forces you as a developer to think, how can I share this with others around the world? It's all built into the language. But for our customers, generally, that doesn't really matter. What is important to them is that they have Java developers. They have a team of enterprise Java engineers, and they probably already have a Java environment, and they need to hook up something that deals with their content and deals with this incredible amount of content that is piling up in all of their systems. And that is, Hippo fits in right there. So we try to be a system that is really open, so we can hook up to all those other systems very, very nicely. And Java is the enterprise language, and there's lots and lots of developers that know how to work with Java, which is important. Of course, there's lots of developers that know Python, which is what Plone uses, but within the enterprise world, the standard is Java.
I think you just extended the olive branch slightly with that last part. Matt, let's have you answer the same question from your perspective, whether it's Python from a language perspective, or whether we're talking about just the Zope application platform. Tell us about your architecture and why its advantages. There aren't many who are using it that's obvious, at least in my mind. Tell us about it.
Right. Well, as IE said, I mean, to the end users, it doesn't matter. It's a one programming language or another. When you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, it's a programming language. Although, whilst I'm already on the hate mail list, I remember somebody once telling me that Python was designed to be used, Java was designed to be sold, and I always thought that was an interesting comment on it. Yes, Java may be the standard in enterprises, but it's a very verbose language. I used to do some Java programming when I came out of university, and by the time I'd worn through 3 different keyboards, I realized there's got to be a more efficient way of writing programming, and that was Python. In terms of your comment about not many people using Python, well, Python's actually the fastest growing, or one of the fastest growing languages on the web. At the moment, there's a study by a company called Taobi that look at job adverts worldwide for programmers, and Python is one of the fastest growing languages out there. It's it powers a big chunk of Google. There's a lot of other companies that use Python, often behind the scenes that people don't see. So the sort of things that we often see is Java stuff is often very over-engineered in my mind. I'm sure Java people would say well-engineered. But Python is just a lot more fun and a lot quicker to get anything actually done and developed. The other great thing with Python is there's a package library of all different packages out there. So I actually asked out on Twitter before this, and REA answered it. From the Java perspective, there's a thing called Maven that has some packages on it, but they're pretty big, high-level things. The Python package index has 15,000 packages on there, and often for little bits and pieces that you need. So things like date time processing. You've got a date and you want to actually convert it into something nice like 3 hours ago or yesterday or something nice and descriptive. There's packages to do something like that. And in fact, if you want to get, as some would say, the best of both worlds, there's a project called Jython, and that is actually Python running on the Java JVM. And I know a lot of people actually use Python in conjunction with Java and use Java for a lot of the heavy lifting, the enterprise stuff, the stuff that IE said is the standard within enterprises, and use Plone to Python to glue it all together and provide the flexibility and the rapid development that they need.
Okay, and
so,
I'm going to toss a question from the audience out there directed towards you.
Hey, V, can I just ask a quick, I'm sorry, let me just ask a quick clarification to that, because Matt, you did make a point that, it doesn't really matter to the end user. However, I'd say, my question back to you is, from an enterprise standpoint or anywhere, isn't it true that you're kind of only supporting the ZOP object database, and does that not affect your ability to kind of, isn't that a big barrier to entry for some who might already have an infrastructure that they don't want to necessarily switch away from?
No, actually, it's not. So the ZOP object database is the sort of persistence layer that ZOP and Plone use, but that can actually be backed onto various other systems. So there's a product called Rel Storage that allows you to leverage your existing, say, Oracle, Postgres, MySQL, whatever it is, infrastructure, and have the ZODB store its data in there for that exact reason. You've got an existing investment in backup, failover, recovery, all of that kind of stuff. Use it, and you can use it with Plone and the ZODB.
Good stuff. Okay, Veronica, back over to you.
Thanks, Scott. And Matt, there's a question from the audience saying they've heard a lot about how difficult templating is in Plone. Would you like to respond to that?
Sure. So historically, the focus on Plone has changed a lot over the years. Originally, Plone was actually really easy to do templating in. You could, on the website, you could go into a Plone website, you could edit it through the web and just change stuff. And people loved that. That was fantastic. The big problem was it became a maintenance nightmare. You couldn't version control those changes. You couldn't repeatedly deploy them very easily. You couldn't do unit tests against them because they're all stored in the database. We then moved to the fact that all of the templating was then done on the file system, and we swung a bit too far that way. We're now sort of settling in the middle. It's now possible that you can actually upload just a zip file to Plone with a bunch of CSS and JavaScript in, and that will do all your theming for you. And that is a very easy way to do simple theming stuff within Plone. If you want to do more complex stuff, yes, you're going to need to know a bit of Python. But if you want to do complex stuff in any content management system, you're going to need to know a bit about the guts of it and the knows of programming language to do stuff anyway.
All right, Matt, thanks. Scott, back to you.
Okay, the next question, we'll keep Matt on the hot seat. Let's talk about user experience a little bit. So, Plone history has a relatively bad user experience front. So convince me, I know you've been over there for a while, it's been a good solid 6+ months now, but convince me that version 4 really changes all that. And specifically, one area of that is the kind of learning curve for admins, which I've heard a fair amount about. And can you speak to that specifically as one aspect of the user experience? And has that been solved and addressed in your mind as well by this most recent release?
Okay, I would probably say that that's a bit of an unfair assessment of Plone. I would admit that from a developer point of view, things have been a bit difficult to get into, and get started with the development previously. But the user experience has always been pretty good. The user experience was one of the main things that started Plone. Plone was a project to provide a better user experience on top of a system called CMF, which was built in Plone. And CMF is the same thing that Nuxio used to use for their content management system. Plone is a user experience bit on top, and has actually been very good. With Plone 4, the big kind of focus on that is what we call elegant minimalism. Within Plone 4, there's the interface has got very little rope for you to hang yourself as an end user. It's very simple to do stuff. It's got a hierarchical nature, so you a bit like, say, a wiki, you just go up to the page you want to edit, and you can just edit it there. There's not a separate back end that you go to and do your editing in, and then have to publish that to a separate front end area. It's all done in one place there, so that makes things a lot easier. We've fixed a couple of rough edges in the recent versions of Plone, so things like the advanced search used to present you with just so many options. I mean, it was very advanced, but for most users, one person described it to me as it's only good for scaring small children. So we fixed that kind of stuff. But Plone's actually been has pioneered a lot of bits and pieces within user experience, such as live search. Plone was one of the first systems that if you started typing, it would start bringing up search results for you live, a bit like Google Suggest does. So we've actually been at the forefront of a lot of bits and pieces over time. But yeah, we're refining it, and it's getting even better as time goes on.
Okay. I mean, if that were true, I feel like that was the biggest kind of first claims that were made about, the kind of V4 release was, hey, we've improved our user experience. To me, from a marketing standpoint, that says there was an issue there. So maybe it's an unfair classification. I'm not so sure I agree, but anyway, good answer. Arya, over to you. So 7.5 was a big release for you not too long ago, and you talked a lot, a fair amount about user experience with it as well. But help me understand kind of your user experience and how it's modeled. I know that you and I have a conversation which you nicely tweeted out where I said that you have a team of rock star developers, right? And I guess you lost some sleep over that, so I apologize there. But I hope they weren't the ones that designed this UI. I mean, nothing bad against the geeks, and by the way, that's a term of endearment as I use it. But how did you guys improve this UI design? Are people out there testing it? Again, back and forth with this community. How are you ensuring that you actually do have a nice interface, and how do you get that feedback from your user base?
Right. Okay. So yeah, this is one of the things that Hippo as a company does. We have our team of user interface designers, who actually work with our customers and go to users and see what their experience is, how well it works for them, and then use that feedback in next versions of the system. So we spend a lot of time on user experience. We spend a lot of time doing user interface design and research and testing for it. So this is part of what I consider what the commercial company Hippo invests a lot of its time and resources in. I have to admit, I'm not really sure whether this whole conversation. I also noticed from the tweets online, am I supposed to bash on on Matt and the Plone team? We are being way too nice, and I have to add another compliment to the Plone guys. You did very well when you moved from version 3 to version 4. The version 3 UI was really, really bad. It was really bad, and 4 is much better, but it's still the same thing, which kind of surprises me. But I leave that to Matt to respond to. For Hippo, it's been something that has been with us ever since we started, and we take it very seriously.
Great. Matt, would you like to respond to that quickly, or shall I move on?
Yeah, I can quickly respond to it. So the Plone 3 user interface is basically the same interface Plone has had, the same style that Plone has had since 2001. You might recognize some of the CSS for Plone 3 is actually the CS for Wikipedia.
I'm not sure I'd trump that point, by the way. I'm not sure that that argument is in your favor, but go ahead.
Well, this explains where we're getting to. So recently, you know, for Plone 4, it was decided, okay, we need to move up with the times now. The Plone user interface is a bit dated. So it was the default theme for Plone was redesigned. That was not really for a user experience in terms of a usability issue. That was really to do with basically just making Plone a bit prettier for people to look at, and also making it easier to theme. The point is that it's a default theme that can get out of the way so that you can put your own custom theme in much easier without a sort of a visual clash between the old style that was a decade old and something new you wanted to do.
I think that's a fair distinction that you're making that I wasn't making, which is kind of visual peer versus kind of usability. I think the former gets in the way of the latter, however, sometimes. But and some folks, especially when they're just kind of poking around, as you can do, especially in the open source world, and just trying things out as they're trying to figure out what they'd like to use, I think it's still fair to say the UI gets awful, you know, in the way if you're not up with the time, so to speak. So I still stand by my first point and Arye's echo that version 3, you know, version 4 is a big improvement over version 3, and that it was an issue that needed to be addressed. But
exactly, that's why we fixed it.
Good stuff. Well, I felt like you were saying before that it didn't even need to be fixed, but we did anyway, so to speak. So anyway, let's move on. Let's talk about support quickly. And by the way, we've got about, what is that? I can't do the math, but it looks to be about 18 minutes or so. So let's try to get through a few here. We'll make this a lightning round. Arye, tell me, so from a support standpoint, right, I would think that, you know, being an open source product would generally mean you've got a kind of a nice community, but given that you're a commercial open source vendor, I'm presuming that your community is a bit smaller. And also specifically, I've seen that it's, you know, concentrated geographically in your locale a bit more, right? Which makes sense. But so kind of, I guess, tell us, is that kind of two strikes against you? I guess one, the fact that you're commercial open source, do you have less involvement by the community, at least from a support standpoint, if I'm trying to support myself as I work with your product? And two, given the kind of, that you're, you know, if I'm in the US or if I'm in Australia and I'm trying to install, am I even going to be able to understand the comments in your forum, so to speak? You know, what's your support model, and specifically for US, for self-support, and specifically for kind of US or non kind of Benelux clients, how well does that hold up?
Right. Okay, so first of all, English is our standard language. So
okay.
don't worry about our community forums or the mailing list or whatever. It's all in English, and also because we have people in the U.S. and in Asia working with us, we have to. But more importantly, the Apache Software Foundation, where our roots are in, has a very specific way of dealing with the community, and we learned a lot from that part of the open source world, and we use that in our own development. So open community or open development is a term that comes out of the Apache Foundation, and we feel that it's really important to communicate openly about everything that goes on in the system, even though it's between developers within our office. So we could have two guys sitting in a room next to each other, communicating with each other, using just a mailing list. So we spend a lot of effort to make everything that we do as public as we can, to allow the community to chime in and join the conversation. That's one thing. Then there's the community itself. If you look at the code base of Hippo, I would say that maybe 98% of it comes from Apache. There's a lot of projects in there that we use. You mentioned a couple of them, Scott, like Cocoon and Jackrabbit, even though Cocoon is no longer in version 7. But yeah, so there's a lot of community involvement that we have over there. But of course, we don't see our customers in the Apache Foundation joining these, fundamental projects and asking for support. That doesn't happen. They go to our community and ask the question on our mailing list, and that community is growing rapidly. We've seen, an increase there of, the number of emails on the mailing list. I think doubled every month since the beginning of this year. So that is incredible, and that has everything to do with some of the changes that we put in last year, and the fact that we have a demonstration version of the system online. So we're getting a lot more traction to that community. We have a large number of partners that we work with who are very active on community mailing lists. So they try really hard to answer questions, obviously, because some of them want to they want to expose themselves as being very knowledgeable about the product, which is good for us as well. So we're trying to to motivate them to do that. And then there's, of course, there's the people on the list that I've never met, that I don't know who they are. There's all kinds of people coming in and asking questions, answering questions, and supporting people on the list. However, if you need a company and you need an answer, that's why you would buy a Hippo support subscription. Gives you the guarantee that you will get an answer whenever you run into trouble or whatever. So that's part of our business model as well.
Okay, Matt, thanks, Arye. Matt, tell us about support model for Plone, and how's your how's your community in general? And you talked about the number of kind of services vendors that are out there. I think let me look it up. You talked about 350 solution providers, but I'd imagine that not all are as good as NetSite is, which give you a plug where you're coming from here. And I would think that a disadvantage of being open source is kind of you can't disallow partners, so to speak. So is there a huge variation in the support that one can get using Plone and the services organizations who have rallied around it?
And Matt, just a reminder
there's going to be a
before you
variation.
get to that answer, just to keep your answers tight, please, and Arye as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Veronica.
Sure. Of course, there's going to be some variation there in amongst the countries and the companies. As you say, you can't disallow somebody, but generally they are pretty good. Go on plone.org. You can go and search for them. You can find out what they've done. You can see case studies. Generally, they speak for themselves. You can find companies that deal in your industry sector or in your country. In terms of support in general, there's about a dozen odd books published on Plone. There's a very good community support on the mailing lists on IRC. We now started using Stack Overflow to do a lot of our questions and support, because people find that very easily. And there's the Plone conferences. So there's an annual conference every year, big annual conference. Last year we hosted it in the UK. Year before that it was in Budapest. This year now it's in San Francisco in November. So there's a lot of stuff that happens there. There's a lot of people speaking, a lot of talks. There's 4 parallel tracks running over 3 or 4 days, and there's things like training beforehand as well. So you can go and get training on specific aspects of Plone, like administration or specific areas of development or theming or templating. So there's a lot of good stuff there.
Good. Okay. Let's speed through the next question is about use cases, and I'm just going to throw these out there, and especially for speed's sake, I want to name a number of scenarios here. I'll crank off a few, and I'd like you to just give me a quick one-word rating. This is to Matt, about Plone's capabilities. Without, don't give me any more than that. Tell me whether your Plone's capabilities are excellent, good, fair, or poor for each one of these use cases that I'm going to list. You ready?
Okay. Yep.
Kind of a brochureware site.
Fair.
Okay. Interactive marketing site, a bit more larger.com, personalized, etc.
Yeah, very good.
Very good. Which wasn't an option. Excellent or good, but I'm just teasing. Okay. Intranet.
Excellent.
Excellent. Global multilingual site.
Excellent.
Okay. A kind of your typical scenario of cross-channel, multi-channel, going to devices, that kind of stuff.
Good.
And how about an ultra-large, really heavy traffic, may not necessarily be complicated, but lots and lots of traffic site?
Good.
Okay, fair enough.
Fair to good.
So everyone in the audience, hopefully that encompasses one of the categories at least that you associate yourself with. I'd love to dig into those, but given we have 9 minutes, let me move it over to Aryeh. Same thing for you. One-word answer. Brochureware site, Aryeh.
Poor.
Poor. Interactive marketing, a larger .com, personalization, etc.
Pretty good, but I'll stick with good. Okay.
Good. All right. Intranet.
Excellent.
Global multilingual site.
Excellent.
The cross-channel, multi-channel scenario.
Yes.
And an ultra-large, really heavy traffic site.
Excellent.
So what the hell? Both of you suck at brochureware sites. Well, one said fair and one said poor. I would think that's a pretty common scenario, but hey, who am I to judge? All right.
It's a sledgehammer to crack a nut, I think, in the case of both of these systems. It's like taking an 18-wheeler down the shops to go and buy your groceries.
You know what? That's a really fair point, Matt, and I'm glad you say that. I think that we tend to eat our own dog food in this field and think that we've, I've got a hammer, where are the nails? And I think that's a very fair point. Good on you for that. So let's skip the next question because it talks about CMIS, which we got to in a question from the audience. So we'll move to that. We'll move to, let's see, who's up? I guess, Aryeh, it's still back to you, right? So, well, no, let's stick with this. I got off the snake. Matt, it's to you. So some unique innovations from Plone. I mean, if not CMIS, then what? Tell me kind of some capability or enhancement. Pick one which set it apart in the market from others.
Okay, if I had to pick just one, I would talk about a system called Diazo that we have. Diazo is a way of theming Plone. The great thing with it is it doesn't just work with Plone. It can be completely standalone. What it does, its tagline is, we write XSLT so you don't have to. If you're a technical guy, you'll understand that. Basically, the point of Diazo is you can take a HTML theme, just an HTML page or CSS from somewhere, and you can apply it to Plone with a series of rules. You can also apply it to any other system. So we've used it to theme .NET portals. You could use it to theme a shopping system. You could use it to theme a SharePoint system or a Drupal system or whatever you wanted to. And that is probably, I think, one of the really good innovations that we've done. If I had to just pick one.
Okay. Aryeh, do the same for us. Tell us, pick one from Hippo, and I'm going to keep you short.
All right. Yeah. Okay, so that must be the context-aware server, which is the content repository that stores all of the content in a very pure format and then delivers it in a format that fits within the context of the audience. We make sure that content is delivered on the right device, taking into account the location of the user, the language preferences of the user, the authentication, even behavioral aspects. What has the user been doing on the website, and what are their interests, and then we can offer them certain content based on that profile. We call that the context-aware server, and we're incredibly proud of it.
Great. Okay. The next question is about implementation options, and you know what? I think we kind of touched on this a little bit already. You know what? Let's move to the next question because I want to get through these. Let's go to pricing. I think some people think that it's not needed to be said, but I want to talk about this, and I'm going to go ahead and go to Matt since that's what it says on the slide. From a pricing standpoint, we know that maybe the software license itself is free for you, but tell me about the total cost of ownership for Plone. Let's assume, for instance, that I've got a moderately sophisticated site which would typically cost me $500K. Well, sorry, I'm speaking in U.S. dollars, but let's say 1.5 man-years to implement, right, a commercial product. Give me the lowdown on comparative costs to implement and maintain that versus kind of anywhere else. What can I expect to pay for that for Plone?
Well, of course, as you already said, this is it is a really tricky question.
Yep.
The main thing that you're paying for is the time for the developer. So you mentioned 1.5 man years. That's what you're paying for. So whatever the salary is, or the rates that people charge. Now, because Plone is a global product and there are all of these different companies all around the world doing it, that's going to vary. So if you go to somewhere like in Norway, your average developer costs are going to be higher than if you go to somewhere like maybe Brazil or Mexico. So the costs really are going to depend upon where you are and what you're doing and the type of company. So a company that is going to give you whatever Prince2 certified project management and all this kind of stuff is probably going to charge more than just a small 1 or 2 person web shop. So I guess it really does depend upon the type of thing you do. Now, I mean, I can only speak from NetSite's point of view. The type of projects we get involved in, if we're trying to build an intranet for a company with a bit of customization and that kind of stuff in there, then the initial sort of project costs we're looking at are somewhere in about the in US dollar terms, probably about the 70 to 100K type sort of project to deal is the sort of thing that we deal with. And then
so just so that I'm sorry, Matt. So just so that we get an apples-to-apples comparison, because as you know, I'm going to ask Arya the same thing. Let's talk about a 3,000-hour project, or let's talk about not an intranet. I assumed about a 3,000-hour project for a kind of mid-size implementation, but let's not go with a specific use case. Do you think? Are you more or less than the average, given that you're in Plone? Are you more or less than the average services cost for say, a commercial product?
I would say we're less. From what I've seen, again, I'm only speaking from NetSite's point of view, but from what I've seen dealing with, commercial product providers, I think we're generally less.
Okay, I think I would love to dig down into that, because I tend to disagree over the long term. I'm talking TCO, but hey, that's great. Okay, perfect. NetSite's got it down. Arya, tell me from your perspective, how about you? I mean, you've got you talked about it's not a licensing cost that you're paying for; it's a support model. So if we're implementing Hippo, that scenario, break down your cost for me from a services and a support standpoint.
Right,
really
okay.
quickly.
Yeah. So first of all, the support subscription, which is what you pay to Hippo, the company, that starts at $20K a year, depending on your setup, and there's different service level agreements there. If you want to have 24/7 support and you need 30-minute response times, then obviously it's going to be a little bit more expensive than that. But if you're quite you can manage yourself, then it could be as little as 20K. Then there's the project cost, as Matt said as well. That could be anything. But with Hippo, typically Hippo is implemented in situations where we have to interface with lots of external systems. So these projects tend to be quite complex. And I am very sure that Hippo is, when it comes to cost, it's a lot less than commercial products because of our open architecture and the ability for you to customize the product itself and to work with the community and our developers to tailor it to your needs. And I would love to argue with you, Scott, about the TCO, because in the end I'm sure it is lower with Hippo, but maybe now is not the time to do so. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, great. And then let me just do this. Oh, please.
I'm going to interrupt here just to say we are, of course, coming to the end, but the questions keep coming in, so we're going to go a little bit over time just so our audience knows we'll be going beyond our 90 minutes. I do have a question for both of you, and we'll get quick answers from you. How hard is it to find experts in your system's development and implementation? Arya, let's start with you from Hippo.
All right. Well, first of all, because Hippo uses some very standard Java technology, there's not a lot that that is very specific to Hippo that you need to know. Matt talked before about the templating within Plone. Of course, we have templating within Hippo as well. We use Java Server Pages, which is JSP, or FreeMarker, and those are very common technologies in the Java world. And there's lots and lots of developers in the world that are familiar with those templating languages. Of course, where the real expertise kicks in is more like the content management expert that know how you need to organize the content in the right way, how you set up the authentication structure, who's allowed to do what, and set up the schemas, make sure that the right content goes in the right way. And that is a part where you need an expert or maybe a consultant to help you make an inventory of all the content that you have, and that's mostly what we see. Then we have a large number of partners worldwide that are able to provide those services.
Okay, Arye, thanks for that. And Matt, I'm going to ask you the same question. Finding experts in your systems development and implementation, how challenging is that?
If you're a company wanting to implement Plone and you're looking for experts, then it's very easy. If you just go to plone.net, you can just choose your country and you'll find a list of companies there that can help you. If you're looking to actually recruit people with that expertise, I mean, the best way I can say this is just an example from NetSite. We're looking for a new developer. We put a job advert out at coming up to 5 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, and by Monday morning we had 5 CVs on our desk, 2 or 3 of which had several years worth of commercial Plone experience. So it's not that difficult. If you're doing something interesting and people want to come to work for you, then they'll come and work for you. They can pick up Plone fairly easily. There's some stuff to learn. We don't quite have the benefit that some of the Java systems have of common technology between different systems, but then we do have common technology between some of the Python systems. So if somebody's got experience in some of the Python systems, then they will be able to pick up Plone pretty easily.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Scott, back to you.
Okay, so we're going to offer this last. And by the way, we've had really great audience interaction. It's been fantastic this whole time. We've even got nearly the full crowd still on the webinars. I'm looking at the numbers. So I'm hoping this is compelling to everyone. But let's end off with a bang here. The last thing is, Arye and Matt, I told you both that you'd be allowed to ask each other a question. So let's end on a bang here. And I know the picture that we have shows 2 guys with their boxing gloves on, but let's shed those. Arye, ask your question to Matt, something that's going to leave us with something to remember here.
Should I take off my gloves or put them on? I'm not really sure.
No, take them off right now. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I'm not sure if you ever had them on in the first place, but shed them if you did.
All right. Okay, so here's my question to Matt, and this is about what I see as the fundamental difference between Hippo and Plone. So I hope you're able to answer it. If you look at Plone, it's really web page oriented. You go into a web page, you change the content on that web page, and you store that content with that single web page. I know you mentioned multi-channel publication before, but I haven't really seen it from the product itself. Being able to manage or edit content on the page is really great in a world where content is written for and published on just one single site, and a piece of content is only rendered on one single web page, and all within one single website. But the point is that that is behind us now. We all know that tomorrow, we'll need a new website. We have a new design. We need a new sub-site, or maybe a couple of new sub-sites. We need a mobile site. The web platform is growing. You need to hook into a social network. All kinds of things are happening. A combination of all of that. It's no longer just about web pages, but I see that as a fundamental part of Plone ever since the beginning, that you're dealing with those web pages. Now, my question is, how do you see Plone survive in a world where content management is no longer about just managing web pages, but you have to take into account all those different devices, audiences, channels, platforms, iPads, augmented reality, everything, where everything is changing? Kind of a long question, but I hope you can answer it, Matt.
The short version is, when are you going to get with the times, right? I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
No, that's actually a fantastic question. I don't think I could even have paid you to ask a better question, because it's actually something that I wanted to bring up earlier but didn't quite find the right time to. So, okay, you're saying that Plone deals just with pages. That's probably an artifact of the way that you've had a look at Plone. I mentioned that Plone has an object database. So everything in Plone is an object. Everything, the database is schemaless. What you see as a page is actually an object in a database with a whole bunch of metadata around it, various fields, and then to display that object, the object publisher applies a theme, a template to that object to render it. And each object can render itself based upon the context in which it wants to be rendered. So actually, Plone, I mean, right from the very start, has been very good at separating presentation and content. So mobile is actually really easy. There's a product called Plone.go Mobile, which is an add-on that does the sort of stuff that you were talking about for Hippo in terms of the device detection and all that kind of stuff. But that's all really built into Plone. We've developed, as NetSite, we've developed mobile sites for people reusing content from their intranet, displaying it on an iPad or a kiosk or a mobile phone, or sending it out via, you know, SMS or Twitter or Jabber or whatever it might be. So, you know, Plone is actually suited to that. What you maybe, when you look at Plone, is you're looking at the user interface, in which, in the user interface, we've made it, in many cases, you think you're adding a page, because that's what many people perceive, that's what they actually want to do. But actually, under the hood, yeah, you can publish out to any system. So I don't think we need to get with the times. I think we've already been with the times right from the very start, or we've been ahead of the time. I mean, we've been using an object database since before this NoSQL movement came around. You know, the ZODB has been around nearly 15 years now. It's probably a question of perception and marketing that we've got to improve as a community to make sure people are actually aware of these features within Plone and the capabilities of Plone in those regards.
So, Arye, I think Matt fundamentally disagreed with the premise of your question. Do you have a quick response to that? I think it would be valid.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because this is the problem, is that if you look at Plone, and I did, it looks like a web page management system. It walks like a duck, it talks like a duck, and it's a web page management system, and that's how people see it. And what you're saying is great, and I think you told me before somewhere last year that Plone has that object database. I know you do. But the problem is that it's not just about creating content for a web page and then repurposing that on a mobile site. It's also managing those mobile channels, because the mobile channel behaves different. You have to you might want to have a different structure. You might want to have a different navigational system. You want to make sure that the mobile experience is as good as it gets. And I don't see that in Plone. I just see the web pages. I believe that you can use that same content and push it off to mobile, but you're still with the same concept like you were in 2001, even though it's an object database underneath.
So quickly, so that this doesn't go on too many threads, I'm going to throw it over to Matt to ask his question. Matt, if you want to figure out how to work in a reply comment to that, but otherwise, let's take it back to the maybe to the Twitter channel. By the way, audience, I think we've only lost less than 10% of our audience, and we are an hour and 39 minutes in. So Matt and Arye, you have done a fantastic job here keeping everyone's attention. Matt, bring us home with your last question.
Right. Yeah, we can continue that Arye's one on Twitter, because I think we've got some good examples we can show you that might show that. But I think I agree with you in terms of the marketing and the perception may be something we need to work on. So, my question to you, so we've had our banter, we've exchanged our blows on here, although I think Scott would probably agree we've been pretty nice with each other. But just to round it off, how do you think, we as open source CMSs can collaborate in the CMS marketplace to make open source an even stronger option for clients in the enterprise sector?
Wow, Matt ends with a kumbaya question. Go ahead, Arye.
I didn't expect that, Matt. So you got me.
Let me. Can I rephrase this partially? And Matt, I don't want to take over your question, but I'd like to just change it a little bit because again, I hear this theme about kind of open source versus everyone, and I just really think that open source, much like the cloud, which is a completely bastardized term, but is just a delivery framework that shouldn't necessarily matter in the longer term. I think open source as well is just a, whether you give away your source code or not, I don't think that has to be the premise. So can I change your question to say, what can you guys also learn from the others? I think there's more ground to make up there, frankly. When I say the others, I mean the proprietary folks. Would you mind me changing your question to that?
Okay, go for it.
Or maybe answer both.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So could you repeat that, Scott, just one more time, because I was thinking about the original question.
A rephrase is, how do we suck comparatively, and what can we learn to get better? Right. Sorry for the crudeness of that, but that's the rephrase. Is what are we necessarily bad at? What can we learn from each other better, and what can we learn from everyone else to kind of raise the bar in general? I think that's the question.
Right. Well, what I see currently is that open source CMSs are considered, for a large part, to be as good as non-open source systems, and I think there's a trend going on right now. People don't care that much anymore about something being closed source or proprietary. They just want to have a solution for their problem. And they see the open source world as this really innovative space where solutions are created. And I think, honestly, we're doing a great job. And I think that this session itself is I really appreciate being here and talking with all of you and exchanging ideas. But I think it should not have been a Hippo versus Plone session, honestly. I think we should both get the chance to do another session and compete against one of the big guys, so to speak, because I think either one of us would be very capable of beating them in a boxing ring, and I would look forward to that. So I'd like to hand it over to Scott and the team over there. Just think about that. And then Scott, could you help me with your rephrase?
My rephrase was essentially where you're going, I think, which was Matt's question originally is, what can we learn from each other in the open source community to improve? And I was basically saying, take the open source off of that, and what can what are the kind of exposures that you have in the open source community, and what can you learn from the proprietary community, or just in general? How can we kind of, what can we all do better to a degree? I think that was yeah.
Oh, it's just a matter of time before the proprietary CMS world dies.
That's a great way to end the show. Let's just stop it there. That's fantastic. Somebody tweet that. That's great. I love that answer.
I was being very serious.
And I don't doubt that you are. And it was probably an intro to something more interesting. But listen. This has been a fantastic hour and 45 minutes. We've even had people join the show since recently. We are at CMS Connected having monthly events where we're matching up products one against the other. To your point, Aryeh, we happen to pick two open sources. We probably shouldn't do that again. Let's see some differentiation in the next time. So we're going to be doing this monthly. Please let your friends know. Follow us on Twitter at CMS Connected. Follow the hashtag and continue to contribute to this conversation. Make sure that to take note of our sponsors. I think Veronica will point out as well. And by the way, I'm going to give a quick plug because he helps us out. But we've got a good friend of many of us know in the industry who has started a great tool called PugPig. If you go to pugpig.com, it has just launched. It was a write-up in CMS Wire. But for those who are trying to get out to the devices and to the multi-channel, it's a good way to do it. So take a look at that. But thank you guys both. This was really fantastic. I really enjoyed this back and forth. Thanks to the audience for some really great questions. And I think this was a great job, really successful.
And if I can jump in, Scott, I want to thank you, my special guest, Scott Lewer, for co-hosting with me today. I agree. This has been a fabulous hour and 45 minutes. So thank you all so much, and thanks to the audience, and especially to our vendor guests, Matt Hamilton from Plone and Arye Khan from Hippo. Terrific job, both of you. Now, in the audience, for those of you who didn't get a chance to have your questions answered, because I know we had a ton of questions, or if you would like a Plone or a Hippo product demonstration, please feel free to contact our guests at that contact information on the screen right now. I also want to thank our sponsors. Once again, CMS Connected sponsors Falcon-Software, Prescient Digital, and CM Pros. And again, if you'd like to discuss your web CMS project with Prescient or Falcon-Software, you can visit their website for contact information. So Scott has mentioned we are going to be doing this monthly, and there you go. Mark your calendars. Our next CMS Connected show set for July 15th. It's going to be another very active one, I'm sure, featuring Product Day software and FatWire. You can register today at cms-connected.com. So we hope you enjoyed today's show, and we look forward to hosting all of you again on July 15th. Many thanks again to both our guests today, and everyone, have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you all.
The organizer